Yeah. This is gonna be it, baby. Come on, baby. No. Good boy. You know what I mean, Vern? He goes, I know what you mean.
One study found 3% of the electricity used in California went for raising weed. And that's even before recreational pot became legal in the state.
And so we want to make sure that it is not something that is going to throw us out of whack with the Global Warming Solutions Act.
That state law requires Massachusetts to cut by 80% by 2050 from 1990. But the energy needed to grow a single pound of pot indoors can put 5,000 pounds of climate-changing CO2 into the atmosphere. Peter Bernard is helping to solve the problem with an active but laid-back approach. On his porch of his house south of Boston, he grinds up some homegrown, fills a rolling paper, and lights up. Bernard is executive director of the Massachusetts Grower Advocacy Council.
One of the nice things about this kind of work is you could be smoking up at any given time and it seems like it's okay. Nobody's going to say anything to you about it.
Once a type A tech guy, Bernard began growing medical marijuana after hurting his back. Now he represents cultivators, large and small, helping craft growers and corporations navigate the complex state marijuana regulations.
If I'm talking to a legislator or a regulator and I'm trying to be all proper, it's cannabis. If I'm talking to my friends, it's weed. Or let's smoke a bone.
Peter Bernard runs the Grower Advocacy Council out of his home, where he also raises his private stash. Whoa,
You smell that? That's the smell of success.
It's also the smell of money. A window AC and dehumidifier hum in the background. The electric bill for his small grow room runs $110 a month.
Cannabis likes to have a Goldilocks zone of environment. Your temperature's going to be just right, your humidity's going to be just right. If you do, they're going to be at their happiest.
Bernard's cannabis look very content. He has 2 strains of marijuana here. Blue Dream with big flowering buds grow under a purple light cast by an expensive LED. And Blue Magoo's bathed in yellow under a low-cost ceramic metal halide lamp. The lamps are on 12 hours or more a day. Bernard's small crop highlights the challenges large producers will face trying to meet the new state energy regulations. Those growing more than 10,000 square feet of pot are limited to 36 watts per square foot. Smaller growers, 50 watts. It's complicated.
This is why people are having a problem with this wattage deal. That light costs $150, my ceramic metal halide. My LED light costs $850. But the ceramic metal halide costs me $40 a month to run. The LED costs me $8. So you're paying now or you're paying later.
Or you can use renewables. If a commercial grower gets 100% of their energy off the grid, they can use as much electricity as they want.
It's going to force larger growers to think outside the box to solve their lighting problems. There are a lot of really viable LED solutions, but the capital upfront investment of that can be prohibitive.
Alternatively, growers can think inside the box.
So this is the STEM box. Basically, this is going to be a pre-built modular grow system.
Chris Gennaro is co-founder and chief tech officer of STEM Cultivation. In a Salem Wharf warehouse stands their prototype device. It's designed to use science, technology, engineering, and math to produce pot the most energy-efficient way.
As a mechanical engineer, this was like a dream project for me. I got to just take all of the coolest technologies and put together a system to help maximize yield and efficiency of growing.
The STEM box is a self-contained vertical hydroponic pot farm. Roots mounted in 24 plastic columns that slide in and out for harvesting are automatically fed precise amounts of water and nutrients. A 5-ton AC keeps 240 plants Goldilocks happy.
We just plugged in the pump to get the recirculating hydroponic system going. Now we're going to turn on the lights.
Whoa, that's bright. I feel like you got a suntan in here. You have to wear shades. The state-of-the-art LEDs lining the STEM box are made by a Massachusetts company. The lights are intense and positioned just right to maximize plant canopy exposure.
To us, efficiency equals cost. More efficiency, lower cost. It's as simple as that.
Stem Cultivation CEO Kyle Moffitt is the money guy. He estimates that in the 3 months it takes to grow 40 pounds of pot in a stem box, the system will use the same amount of electricity as the average home in a year. Licensed growers will rent the boxes and grow the plants. Moffitt says his startup needs seed money.
What we'd like to do is grow ourselves, get a micro business cultivator license, just for up to 5,000 square feet. We're not trying to be, because that R&D will help fund the business.
So you grow the business by growing the plants. Despite his growth, Kyle Moffitt predicts the future of STEM is bright.
It could get big fast because our objective is so clear. We're trying to figure out what is the absolute most efficient way to grow cannabis. Really any plant. And that's why we call it a universal agronomy system. It can be for anything.
Marijuana could be just the tip of the iceberg. Lettuce, that is. There are already a few companies in Boston using hydroponics and shipping containers to raise crops. Energy consultant Sam Milton runs Climate Resources Group in Arlington, Massachusetts.
For me, the really exciting part about this industry is that, I see it as a bridge to a future where we have real sustainable urban agriculture, where we're growing the plants that we need to feed our community here in Boston.
Imagine energy-efficient, sustainable, vertical indoor farming, pioneered in part by pot. Now that's dank. For Here and Now, I'm Bruce Gilligan, and you're listening to Here and Now.
Think for just a second about the economic impact of the family road trip.
These great chains were built on people traveling America's highways.
I'm Kai Rizal. Oh, those road trips do still happen, just not like they used to. That story, the day's numbers from Wall Street, and the rest of the day's business news as well. Next on Marketplace. Today at 6 p.m. East, 3 West on NPR Now.
I'm Marty Moscoe. Today, Radio Times, how a Russian immigrant came to write the country's most patriotic anthems. We'll talk about the life and music of Irving Berlin. That's Radio Times. Today, join us. This evening at 9 East, 6 West on NPR Now.
I'm Giselle Grayson, a producer at NPR. When journalists cover Haiti or Japan or Libya, they may go in a small team, but back home, a hive of people is focused on helping them. For every one voice on the radio, picture a logistics person scrambling to get the equipment ready, a producer booking them on the first flight in, an editor calling for a translator, many people dedicated to getting the story right. This is NPR.
Funding for Here and Now comes from WBUR Boston and MathWorks, creators of MATLAB and Simulink software for technical computing and model-based design. MathWorks, accelerating the pace of discovery in engineering and science. Learn more at mathworks.com. And LegalZoom.com, providing public radio listeners and others with legal advice and guidance on business matters and estate plans through its network of independent attorneys. More information is available at legalzoom.com/now.
This is Here Now from NPR and WBUR. I'm Jeremy Hobson. Tesla is finally a real car company, according to CEO Elon Musk, after it manufactured more than 5,000 of its Model 3 sedans last week. But even after hitting that self-imposed production milestone, Tesla is still spending more than it's taking in. For more, we're joined by our weekly guide to the world of tech, Recode. Johanna Bouya is Recode's senior transportation editor and joins us now. Hi, Johanna.
Hi, how's it going?
Going well. So Tesla manufactured more than 5,000 of these Model 3 sedans last week, more than 7,000 cars total. How significant is that? How does it compare to other car companies?
It's a big deal for Tesla. In 2017, Tesla only delivered 100,000 cars. So 7,000 cars a week is a big deal in the world of Tesla. But relative to other mass market automakers, it's sort of a drop in the bucket. A Ford executive recently said that they make 7,000 cars in about 4 hours. So compared to what Tesla wants to become, the company still has a long way to go. But relative to what it has done, it is a pretty big milestone.
So is it fair for him to say it's a real car company now?
The true test will be whether the company will be able to not only sustain that production rate, but do so affordably and efficiently and without sacrificing either quality of the vehicle themselves or worker safety. And we have new reports that say that the factory workers were working around the clock, and you know there was a lot of pressure on the workers to meet these goals. And we're seeing new reports that say that, and the company's disputing this, but that are saying that Tesla actually cut corners in terms of testing the quality of the vehicle, all in order to meet this deadline that was self-imposed by Elon Musk.
The Model 3 is supposed to be Tesla's transition from a luxury car maker to the mass market. And I have to say, driving around these days, I do see more Teslas on the road than I used to, although that could also be because they're unlike other cars. You notice them more than you would notice, say, a Honda if you're driving by. But are they becoming a mass market company, do you think?
It hasn't happened yet. The company has yet to ship the affordable, lower-priced Model 3 that was promised to the world. The company is now focusing on shipping the more expensive model or version of the Model 3. So they're working very hard to get to that point, but it just hasn't happened.
And in terms of keeping up this level of production, how difficult is that going to be?
Well, in order to even meet this level of production, you know, and that was originally Elon Musk wanted to meet it at the end of 2017, but in order to just make it to this point before the beginning of July, the company had to build a tent in order to accommodate a new assembly line. And so Tesla pulled out all the stops in order to meet this deadline. So that's why it's going to be a very big test of Tesla, to see whether or not they're actually going to be able to sustain that.
And they've only had 2 profitable quarters since they went public in 2010. They posted record losses in each of the last 3 quarterly reports. When will Tesla really become profitable?
Yeah, and Elon says it'll happen Q3 and Q4 of 2018. But again, Tesla is not a company that has been known to meet deadlines.
Right. That's Johanna Booyah, who is Recode's senior transportation editor, talking with us about Tesla, which Elon Musk now says is a real car company. Johanna, thank you.
Thank you.
You're listening to Here and Now. Think for just a second about the economic impact of the family road trip.
These great chains were built on people traveling America's highways.
I'm Todd Rizal. Oh, those road trips do still happen, just not like they used to. That story, today's numbers from Wall Street, and the rest of the day's business news as well. Next time on Market Watch. Today at 6 p.m. East, 3 West on NPR Now.
I'm Jack Lepiar. Members of NATO are pushing back on a letter from President Trump that accuses them of not paying their fair share. Members agreed in 2014 to move towards spending 2% of GDP on defense within a decade. Norway, which received one such letter, says it is exceeding the target goals set 4 years ago. Thousands of firefighters have tried to contain a blaze northwest of Sacramento that has nearly doubled in size. Fires now grown to 109 square miles. It's threatening about 700 buildings and has forced at least 300 people to flee. Forecasters say a hurricane in the Pacific is expected to strengthen into a major storm in the next 24 hours, though it is not expected to threaten the coast. Hurricane Fabio is expected to briefly strengthen into a Category 3 storm before it weakens and moves out to sea. You're listening to Here and Now.
First Listen is your connection to discovering new songs from new artists. First Listen lives at music.npr.org.
From SiriusXM Patriot, join me for a special 4th of July event from the National World War I Museum in Kansas City, Missouri. We'll offer those who made the museum come to life in a 2-hour D-Day documentary. This day is set upon a mighty endeavor. One of the most seminal moments that led to a true victory against Nazism and fascism.
David Webb from the National World War I Museum tomorrow at 9 a.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125.
Funding for Here and Now comes from the listeners of WBUR Boston, where the program is produced. ER Station. From Staples, with printers, printer ink, and toner cartridges, business, and in-store print shops for customized presentations, booklets, and manuals. In-store and online. Staples. And College Lines, advising high school families on where to apply to college, based on their chances of getting accepted. Then their mentors guide students through each step of the college admissions process. Learn more at collegeline.com.
It's Here and Now. On this day, July 3rd, 1776, John Adams wrote 2 letters to his wife Abigail with news from Philadelphia, where the Continental Congress was meeting. Adams and the other founding fathers were setting the stage for independence from Britain, and they would demand independence the next day after adopting the text of Thomas Jefferson's Declaration. So these days, we celebrate the 4th of July. But as Here Now the Alex Ashbrook reports, John Adams wanted to celebrate a different day when he wrote those letters 242 years ago. As the founding fathers gave birth to the nation, they had their eyes on the future, and they knew they were making history. But John Adams believed July 2nd, 1776, is really the big day in their history.
I have to believe that it will be celebrated by succeeding generations as the great anniversary festival.
That's Peter Drummond, librarian at the Massachusetts Historical Society. He's reading from one of the letters Adams wrote to Abigail about what had happened on July 2nd, 1776. That was the day the Continental Congress voted for independence, approving a resolution that said these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, and as such they have and of right ought to have full power to make war, conclude peace, establish commerce, and do all the other acts and things which other states may rightfully do. And of the day the Continental Congress took that action, John wrote to Abigail,
that ought to be commemorated as the day of deliverance by solemn acts of devotion to God Almighty, that ought to be solemnized with pomp and parade, with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other, from this time forward forevermore.
Which is, of course, exactly what happens now on the 4th of July, not the 2nd. So John Adams, who was right about so much, was also right about the way we celebrate independence. So it's not the day. For Here and Now, I'm Alex Ashbrook.
All right, and on this 4th of July week, we're also going to take some time to look at American workers and really the shortage of them. Yesterday we spoke to University of Michigan economist Don Grimes, who's looking forward to another strong jobs report from the Labor Department on Friday. Grimes said the current unemployment rate of 3.8% is already historically low.
We go below that on Friday. We will be have the lowest unemployment rate since 1969. Labor markets are very tight, so employers are running into tremendous labor shortages.
Ask Power, based out of Aurora, Illinois, is one of those employers that manufactures electrical connectors for all kinds of industries. Steve Case is founder and managing director, and he joins us now. Steve, welcome.
Nice to be with you.
Well, first, let's start out with what your company does. Electrical connectors. What are those?
Well, anytime you have a source of power and a use of power, you have a cable running between them. And our connectors are on either end, and their job is to enable that transmission of power from point A to point B.
Okay, so that sounds important. You make those connectors. How's business?
I believe this may well be the best financial year in the history of the United States as it relates to the industries we serve.
Really? Why?
Well, the truck industry, for example, is just exploding. The manufacturers of trucks. This is almost the 9th or 10th year, but the fact is that the amount of commerce going on in the United States is requiring.
I'm almost home. I'm up here by Salvation Army. I'll talk to you later. Bye. You stop what? No, I don't want to go there. I'm trying to get home. It's very wet here. Okay, bye-bye.
They have been occurring for some time, but it's certainly at 3.8, 3.9% unemployment. There are far fewer people out there available, and those people that are available are looking for the best jobs.
Really? So how many job openings do you have?
We probably could fill at this point 10 to 15% more jobs than we have, which means essentially, as you can imagine, our people are producing 10 to 15% more hours in overtime. That's really been our short-term solution.
Right, and I was going to ask you about that solution. So you're saying in order to meet the demand that you have, you can't hire more people, so you're paying them more and you're asking them to work longer hours. How's that going?
Well, you know, in general, everybody likes to be paid more. And in general, they get used to a certain level of workload. But, you know, higher workloads, quality and attitude deteriorate over time.
Right, because there's only a limit to how productive a worker can be if you ask them to keep working 10, 12 hours a day for 52 weeks a year.
Absolutely. One of the things we've done is to reinvest in automation. About 15 years ago, it became clear to us that the types of jobs that we had, which fall into the old category of dirty, dark, and dangerous, were no longer attracting the right people. So we invested in automation and training of our employees to broaden their skills. The great news is they produce 300 to 400% more than they did 15 years ago. And at the same time, they're paid 30 to 40% more than they were. What we decided was we need to reinvest in automation, and some of those last jobs that hadn't been automated, we automated, and that's one of the ways we're able to sort of back down the overtime so it isn't really so burdensome.
You know, that's kind of tough too, because then jobs are going away in the long term, and the economy probably won't always be like this. So you're kind of fundamentally shifting your workforce.
Well, yes, that's true, but in my opinion, the workforce has been fundamentally shifting for some time. Those jobs that people didn't want, or those jobs that were no longer competitive, have been offshored, and you know, those are jobs that are meaningful where they land in offshore applications. But American workers want satisfaction and fulfillment and a sense of control, and that's the direction we moved in. We produced about 100% more than we did when we had 100 employees, and now we have 55.
I know you say business is going pretty well, actually, despite this problem, but, you know, what are the effects on your business? Are orders piling up? You're unable to meet the demands of your customers, or what?
Well, we've been fortunate to keep up with the demand, but it's the wear and tear. You know, we've had the same problems, for example, in office positions where we used to be able to ask our own employee base to recommend someone, and then we started going to advertising, and now we despair at both and are basically asking employment agencies to find people for us, and then they'll stay 3 to 4 months, and we find out for one reason or another they were temporary for a reason. So it's really a stress level issue at this point. But if we weren't being proactive about automation and investing in our people, I mean, we would be in serious performance trouble.
So what would help? I mean, you're kind of implying that this has been a long-term problem, but would there be a benefit, as counterproductive as this may seem, if the economy cooled off a little bit?
Well, you know, the economy will cool off a little bit. I happen to be a strong believer, this is a personal belief, not a corporate belief, that we should allow immigration on the basis of merit, and that merit should be a function of these are the kinds of jobs that are going unfilled, and people should be admitted who have the qualifications to do those jobs. But in the meantime, we have to continue through automation and holding on to our good people to serve the customer.
All right, Steve Case, Managing Director and founder of Ask Power, based in Aurora, Illinois, a company that makes electrical connectors and, like a lot of other industries out there, struggling with a worker shortage. Steve, thanks. Good luck.
It's been my pleasure.
And tomorrow we're going to hear from someone struggling with this problem in the healthcare industry. Mercy Health in Toledo, Ohio is looking for new recruits by targeting people who've recently lost retail or manufacturing jobs at places like General Motors or Toys R Us. Of course, that means those workers are going to need some new training. Tell us your story at hereandnow.org.
My name is Doug Loffer. I'm a professor at Metropolitan State College of Denver. I'm an NPR junkie. I listen from the first thing in the morning till I fall asleep at night. I get lots of information to use in the classroom from what I hear on NPR. I get ideas for cases I'm creating, research I'm doing. So NPR is my source of in-depth intellectual information and my lifeline to everything.
NPR on Sirius and XM.
1 minute after 5 in the morning.
Boris Johnson says the UK's relationship with Russia is at a very low point.
1 minute after noon.
Senators are divided in part over how much money is needed for those states hit by deadly wildfires and hurricanes.
1 minute after 5 in the evening.
Bitcoin was worth around $1,000 at the start of 2017.
1 minute after 11 at night.
There's a sense that tense relations between Pakistan and the U.S. are worsening.
What's happening? What's known? What's next? 1 minute after the hour. Every hour, every day. From NPR News.
Funding for Here and Now comes from the listeners of WBUR Boston and MathWorks, creators of MATLAB and Simulink software for technical computing and model-based design. MathWorks, accelerating the pace of discovery in engineering and science. Learn more at mathworks.com. And Babbel, a language app that teaches real-life conversations in a new language, like Spanish, French, and German. Babbel's 10 to 15-minute lessons are available in the App Store or online at Babbel, BABBEL.com.
This is Here and Now. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has survived the latest threat to her leadership, but her coalition government remains fragile. She agreed to tighten controls on the Austrian border to stop people who have applied for asylum in other countries from entering Germany. In exchange, her interior minister dropped his threat to resign. Joining us now is the BBC's Jenny Hill. She's in Berlin. Jenny, first of all, what's the reaction there to this agreement?
It's rather mixed, really. You know, on the face of it, it looks as though Angela Merkel has pulled off the compromise of her career. She's saved the coalition government, which really was hanging in the balance, and she's managed to hold on to her post for another day. This row, as you correctly point out, is all about what's happening at the German border, and it's interesting that it happens now because, as you know, the number of people coming into Europe, coming to the German border, is actually significantly fewer people than it was at the height of the refugee crisis in 2015. But this focused completely on the people who are coming to the German border having already registered in another EU country first. Under EU law, they're supposed to stay in that country. We know that didn't happen. And Mrs. Merkel's rather difficult interior minister had decided that he was going to act unilaterally and turn those people away. The compromise is rather complicated. Mrs. Merkel says that she is going to set up so-called transit centres. They're a bit like an airport in that they will be within the German border, but technically they're not on German soil. So the people that Mr. Seehofer is worried about will go into those transit centres, be processed, and then sent back to their original country. The problem there, of course, is that you have to have an agreement between Germany and the EU country to which the people will be sent back. If there aren't agreements, the two leaders said last night that people will simply be turned away at the border and effectively left for Austria to deal with, again, subject to an agreement with Austria. The plan is rather light on detail. It's a bit of a fudge.
So what's Austria saying about this?
Well, Austria's not very impressed. Austria has said that it's going to seal off its southern border to prevent people coming through its country and then getting to Germany in order to be turned back. But I must stress again that we're not talking the same kind of numbers we saw at the height of the refugee crisis. A lot of this, of course, is political rhetoric. We know that the Austrian government is further to the right than it was some time ago, and Mrs. Merkel's under a huge amount of pressure from Mr. Seehofer, not only her interior minister, but leader of her Bavarian Libertarian Coalition partner, they've got a regional election to deal with in October. Migration is a big theme in Germany. So Mrs. Merkel's been under a lot of pressure to really fall into line with a new way of thinking about migration within Europe.
Jenny, when you back up and look at what this means for Europe overall, what does it mean? What does it mean for the EU? What does it mean for the leadership role that Merkel has had?
What's really interesting is that her interior minister actually was threatening to resign if he didn't get his way, and she must have been itching to take that resignation letter. She's not been able to do that, and this is what's really fascinating, because whilst on the surface of it, her own party's leadership backs her, actually reports suggest that her MPs are really concerned about migration. That's because in Germany, and you see this in other European countries too, the far-right anti-migrant AfD party is really gaining ground. It's really stoking up people's fears about migration. They're not always founded, in fact. I come back to this fact that the numbers have fallen significantly. Nevertheless, those fears are there, and politicians are really having to respond to them. It's happening in other European countries. Who would have thought, a year ago, that Angela Merkel, so-called defender of liberal European values, would have an interest akin to that of the new populist Italian government, for example, which is taking a very tough line on asylum seekers indeed. All of a sudden their interests align. So yes, we are seeing a very different Europe with a much harder stance on migration. And Mrs. Merkel, whether she wants to or not, I think, is having to adapt to that.
I want to ask you one more question. There's a New York Times report today that says that President Trump sent letters to Merkel and the leaders of Belgium, Norway, and Canada, NATO members, demanding that they spend more on defense. This comes ahead of the NATO summit next week. Is there a real concern about NATO's future there in Europe because of President Trump's criticisms?
I think there's certainly a fear here that Donald Trump might try to walk away from NATO, and I think there's a sense here that people are concerned that perhaps he doesn't understand why Europeans consider it to be so important. Angela Merkel actually has committed to increasing defence spending year on year. That was a commitment which was made actually before Donald Trump came into office. But you're right, Germany doesn't contribute the 2% that members are supposed to. And it is a big theme now for Germany, which since the Second World War hasn't really concentrated on defence. Its army isn't something which has been a priority. There was always a sense here that defence, that military weren't things to be focusing on. That is all starting to change, and the world is shifting. But interestingly, these are the matters which Angela Merkel would no doubt like to be focusing on. Instead, the last few weeks, she spent every waking moment thinking about migrants turning up at the German border.
There are only 5 countries out of the 28 countries in NATO that actually spend the 2% that they're supposed to on defense. Those would be the U.S., Greece, Poland, Estonia, and the United Kingdom. That's the BBC's Jenny Hill joining us from Berlin. Thank you, Jenny.
Many thanks. It was a pleasure.
And Here and Now is a production of NPR and WBUR in association with the BBC World Service. I'm Jeremy Hobson.
I'm Peter O'Dowd. This is Here and Now.
Funding for Here and Now comes from the listeners of WBUR Boston and LegalZoom.com, providing public radio listeners and others with legal advice and guidance on business matters and estate plans through its network of independent attorneys. More information is available at LegalZoom.com.
I'm Peter O'Dowd. 2 years ago this summer, the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union. But thousands of people took to the streets in London recently to protest and call for another vote. An update on Brexit next time on Here and Now.
The next Fresh Ad, President Trump and Russia. We talk with Michael McFaul, who served as the U.S. ambassador to Russia under President Obama. We'll discuss the planned Trump-Putin summit and what McFaul's experience was like in the room with Putin. Putin blamed McFaul and Hillary Clinton for the protests surrounding Putin's third election as president. Join us. Today at 4 p.m. East, 1 West on NPR Now. I'm Jackie Northam. As NPR's foreign affairs correspondent, I spend a lot of time overseas, in Afghanistan, Pakistan, or earthquake-ravaged Haiti. The stories from these areas can be harrowing and complex, but they matter. NPR is committed to bringing you the sounds, the voices, and stories from all over the world, and to help make sense of them. It's what we do. This is NPR.
For Here and Now comes from MathWorks, creators of MATLAB and Simulink software, accelerating the pace of engineering and science. Learn more at mathworks.com.
From NPR and WBUR Boston, I'm Jeremy Hobson.
I'm Peter O'Dowd. It's Here and Now. Coming up, a heat wave takes over more than half the country just as Americans prepare to go outside for the 4th of July.
Also, the publisher of the Capital Gazette newspaper talks to us about how the staff there are doing after last week's shooting.
They were insistent. They were ready to go. We are going to cover this story because they knew that the community that they serve expected it.
And how do you know if your roof can survive a hurricane? We go to a natural hazards lab to see how companies prepare for hurricane season.
We're going to crank up the wind on a little bit more.
Failure, huh? Coming up Here and Now.
The news is first.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump reportedly plans to encourage schools and universities to stop taking race into account during their admissions process. Multiple news outlets citing unnamed sources are reporting Trump's intention to abandon Obama-era guidelines that had called on universities to consider race as a means of promoting diversity among their student bodies. The dramatic rescue of a youth soccer team stranded in a flooded underground cave complex for more than a week in northern Thailand is far from over. All 12 boys and their coach were found alive yesterday. They're being cared for by medics. But the military has yet to figure out exactly how to get the group of mostly teens and preteens safely above ground before more bad weather and underground floods strike. Michael Sullivan reports from Chiang Rai on what's become a race against the clock.
Rescue workers furiously pumped water from the cave complex today, even as the forecast predicted heavy rain the rest of the week, threatening to flood the cave complex even more, complicating efforts to get the team out. The boys ages 11 through 16 were found about a mile and a half from the cave on Monday. They stopped at the cave after rescues 10 days ago, but were trapped inside by rising water that blocked their exit, forcing them to sink underground. Thai officials are now trying to determine the most expedient and safest way to bring the boys out. The two most widely discussed options are having to swim out with diving gear or waiting until the rain stops and the water subsides, which could take months. For NPR News, I'm Michael Sullivan in Chiang Rai.
Flags are flying at half-staff over the White House and other federal buildings today in honor of the 5 newspaper staffers who were shot and killed in Annapolis, Maryland last week. NPR's Scott Horsley reports President Trump ordered the move in what the White House called a mark of solemn respect.
President Trump has ordered flags lowered after earlier attacks, including school shootings in Florida and Texas. The mayor of Annapolis expressed disappointment when several days passed without a similar show of mourning for victims at the Capital Gazette. White House spokeswoman Sarah Sanders says Trump made the decision Monday night.
There's a certain protocol that is followed. It was, but once the president heard about the mayor's specific request to him, he fulfilled the mayor's request and ordered that the flags be lowered.
Has been critical of the news media. He said the deadly attack on the Annapolis newspaper shocked the conscience of our nation. Scott Horsley, NPR News, the White House.
The county fire in Northern California is spreading. It has charred more than 70,000 acres so far. Several states, mainly in the West, are confronted with a more active fire season. The National Interagency Fire Center says wildfires have burned nearly 2.5 million acres in the U.S. since the start of this year. This is NPR News. President Trump's scheduled summit with Russian leader Vladimir Putin is in less than 2 weeks. A U.S. congressional delegation is in Moscow today to talk about ways of improving U.S.-Russian relations. From Moscow, NPR's Lucian Kim reports the visit by the 8 Republican lawmakers is the first such gathering since Russia annexed Crimea 4 years ago.
Just last week, U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton visited Moscow to hammer out the details of the upcoming Trump-Putin summit on July 16th. The 7 senators and 1 congresswoman are meeting with Russian lawmakers for the first time since 2014, when bilateral relations were frozen because of Russia's military intervention in Ukraine.
That's Lucy and Kim reporting. U.S. Customs and Border Protection has sent letters to 67 landowners near the border requesting permission to survey their land as a possible site for a border wall. But congressional leaders tell Texas Public Radio's Ryan Poppy that it could be decades before any work begins.
Texas Congressman Eric Cuellar says roughly half of the Rio Grande Valley landowners who were sent the letters have agreed to have their land surveyed. But there are some advocating for private property owner rights who are taking the matter to court. Cuellar, Laredo Democrat, says property
from the George Bush times when the original